This happened when I was 17 years old in rural Japan. My grandparents lived in a small village outside of Akita Prefecture. The village was surrounded by mountains and rice fields, and there were maybe 300 people living there. Every summer break, my parents would send me there for a few weeks. The village had a lot of old traditions. My grandfather would constantly warn me about things that sounded ridiculous. Don't whistle at night. Don't walk near the shrine after dark. Don't answer if someone calls your name from the mountains. I assumed it was all just old superstition. One night, I learned why those warnings existed. It was August, the air was humid, and the cicadas were so loud they almost drowned out everything else. Around 10 p.m. I got bored and decided to take a walk. My grandparents were asleep. I grabbed a flashlight and headed down the dirt road that cut through the rice fields. The moon was bright enough that I barely needed the flashlight. Everything was peaceful. The rice plants swayed gently in the wind. The frogs croaked from somewhere in the flooded fields. I remember thinking how different it felt from Tokyo. Then I noticed someone standing far away. At first, I thought it was a farmer. About 100 yards ahead of me, in the middle of a rice field, was the silhouette of a woman. She was standing completely still, not moving, not walking, just staring. I stopped. It was strange because nobody should have been out there that late. I shined my flashlight toward her. The beam didn't quite reach, but I could make out long black hair hanging down her shoulders, white clothing, very pale skin. Something about her posture felt wrong. She wasn't standing naturally. Her head seemed tilted, like she was staring at the ground. I suddenly remembered something my grandfather had mentioned years before. A woman called Hachishaku-sama, 8 feet tall, a spirit that appears near children and young people. I laughed nervously at myself. I was too old for ghost stories. I started walking again. As soon as I did, I heard it. "Po!" The voice was distant, almost carried by the wind. "Po!" I froze. The sound came from the direction of the woman. I couldn't tell if it was a person or something else. Then it came again. "Po!" This time louder. The sound wasn't human. It sounded like someone trying to imitate a human voice. Every hair on my arm stood up. I turned around and started walking back toward the village. I didn't run. I didn't want to seem ridiculous. Then I heard the voice again, directly behind me. "Po!" My stomach dropped. That was impossible. The woman had been at least 100 yards away. Slowly, I looked over my shoulder. The field behind me was empty. The woman was gone. I shined my flashlight everywhere. Nothing. No movement. No people. Just rows of rice plants. Then something moved beside me. Not in front. Not behind. Beside me, inside the field. I heard the sound of something large moving through the rice plants, keeping pace with me. I couldn't see it, but I could hear it. Step. 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 The rice plants rustled as whatever it was moved alongside the road, matching my speed perfectly. I started walking faster. The movement in the field sped up too. I broke into a run. The thing in the field exploded forward. The rice plants bent violently. Something huge was charging through them. And then I saw her, for a split second illuminated by my flashlight. A woman, far taller than any human. Her head rose above the rice plants, above the utility pole. Her neck looked unnaturally long. Her arms dangled at her sides. And her face, I only saw it for a second. But I wish I hadn't. It looked stretched, like wet clay, molded into a human face. Her eyes were completely black. Her mouth hung open impossibly wide. "Po!" The voice shook the air around me. I sprinted. I ran faster than I ever had in my life. The village lights appeared ahead. The moment I crossed the first bridge leading into town, everything went silent. No footsteps, no rustling, no voice, nothing. I looked back. The road behind me was empty. The rice fields were still. The woman was gone. I got home and locked every door. I barely slept. The next morning, I told my grandfather everything. For the first time in my life, I saw genuine fear in his face. He didn't laugh. He didn't tell me I imagined it. Instead, he asked one question. "Did she see your face?" I told him I didn't know. He immediately grabbed his car keys. He drove me to a shrine in the neighboring town. An elderly priest listened to my story. When I described the voice, his expression changed. He told me I was lucky. Then he said something that still bothers me today. "People think these stories are legends." He paused. "They aren't legends. They're warnings." The priest gave me a small protective charm and instructed me never to walk alone at night in that area again. I followed his advice. A week later, I returned to Tokyo. For years, nothing happened. I convinced myself the entire experience had been some combination of panic and imagination. Then, 7 years later, my grandfather died. I traveled back to the village for his funeral. After the ceremony, I stayed one extra night. The village hadn't changed much, neither had the rice field. Around midnight, I couldn't sleep. I stepped outside to get some air. The moon was bright. The fields shimmered silver in the darkness, and there, at the far end of the field, stood a woman, completely still, watching. Even from that distance, I knew it was her. Then, carried softly across the wind, I heard a familiar voice. "Po!" I went back inside and never looked out the window again. The next morning, before leaving, I asked one of the older villagers about the fields. He became quiet. Then he told me something I had never heard before. 3 boys had disappeared near those fields in the 1970s. Their bodies were never found. The villagers stopped searching after the 7th day, because every night, from somewhere in the darkness, they heard a woman's voice calling to them, "Po." And according to him, if you hear it once, she has noticed you. If you hear it twice, she's following you home. This happened during my 2nd year of high school in Japan. The school I attended was old, really old. Parts of it had been standing since the 1960s. The hallways creaked when students walked through them. The windows rattled during strong winds. And like every old Japanese school, it had ghost stories. Most students joked about them. One story everyone knew was Hanako-san, the ghost of a young girl who supposedly haunted school bathrooms. The legend was always slightly different depending on who told it. Some said she lived in the 3rd stall of the girls' bathroom on the 3rd floor. Others claimed she could appear in any bathroom if someone called her name correctly. Nobody actually believed it. At least that's what we all said. One Friday afternoon, my friends and I stayed late to help prepare for the school's cultural festival. We spent hours painting signs and setting up decorations. By the time we finished, the sun had already set. Most students had gone home. The school felt completely different at night. The cheerful atmosphere was gone. The hallways seemed darker, longer, quieter. Around 7 p.m., 4 of us were cleaning supplies out of a storage room when the conversation turned to ghost stories. My friend Riku brought up Hanako-san. Immediately, everyone started sharing rumors. One student claimed his older brother had heard knocking from an empty bathroom. Another said a teacher had quit after seeing a child wandering the halls at night. None of us believed any of it. Then Riku suggested something stupid. "Let's try it." Everyone laughed, but nobody said no. 10 minutes later, we were standing outside the girls' bathroom on the 3rd floor. The hallway was empty. Only a few emergency lights illuminated the corridor. The bathroom door stood slightly open. Beyond, it was darkness. I remember feeling uneasy even before we entered. The air felt colder there. One of my friends joked that we should leave. Nobody moved. Eventually, Riku pushed the door open completely. The bathroom lights were off. Only moonlight filtered through the windows. The stalls stood in a row along the far wall. The 3rd stall door was closed, exactly like the legend. Riku grinned. "Watch this." He walked toward the stall. The rest of us followed. My heart was beating faster than I wanted to admit. Standing in front of the 3rd stall, Riku knocked 3 times. Knock, knock, knock. Then he said, "Hanako-san, are you there?" Silence. Nothing happened. We started laughing. Riku rolled his eyes. "Told you." Then a voice answered, "Yes." Every one of us froze. The voice came from inside the stall. It sounded like a young girl. Soft, quiet, clear. Nobody laughed anymore. The stall door remained closed. My friend Daichi immediately backed away. "Very funny," he said. "Whoever's inside, come out." No response. Riku slowly reached for the stall door. I remember wanting to tell him not to. Something felt wrong, terribly wrong. But before I could speak, he pulled the door open. The stall was empty. There was nobody inside. No feet, no hidden space, nothing. Just an empty toilet. For several seconds, nobody said a word. Then Daichi ran. Actually ran. The rest of us followed. We sprinted out of the bathroom and didn't stop until we reached the 1st floor. Everyone was shaken. But eventually, we convinced ourselves someone had been playing a prank. Maybe a speaker, maybe another student. Something rational. Around 8 p.m. we finished cleaning and headed home. I thought the whole thing was over. I was wrong. The next Monday, Daichi didn't come to school. We assumed he was sick. Then Tuesday passed, still absent. By Wednesday, teachers started asking questions. Nobody could contact him. His parents claimed he never came home Friday night. The police were involved. Searches were organized. Nothing. No sign of him. It was as if he had vanished. Weeks passed, then months. The investigation went nowhere. Eventually, people stopped talking about it. Life moved on. Almost a year later, I stayed after school for basketball practice. I was leaving around sunset when I realized I had forgotten my water bottle. It was still in my classroom on the 3rd floor. The school was nearly empty. Most students had already left. I climbed the stairs alone. As I walked down the 3rd floor hallway, I noticed something strange. The girls' bathroom door was open. I immediately thought of that night. I tried ignoring it. I grabbed my water bottle and headed back. As I passed the bathroom, I heard something. A child giggling. My entire body went cold. The sound came from inside. I stopped. The hallway was empty. No students. No teachers. Just silence. Then another giggle. I should have left. Instead, curiosity got the better of me. I stepped inside. The bathroom was empty. Every stall door was open, except one. The 3rd stall. Its door was closed. My stomach dropped. I slowly backed toward the exit. Then I heard a voice. A girl's voice. The same voice we had heard a year earlier. "Where is your friend?" I froze. The voice came from inside the stall. "Where is your friend?" The question repeated, over and over, the voice becoming louder each time. "Where is your friend? Where is your friend? Where is your friend?" The stall door suddenly slammed open. The sound echoed through the bathroom. I ran. I didn't look back. I sprinted down 3 flights of stairs and out of the school. As I reached the front gate, I glanced toward the 3rd floor windows. Someone was standing there. A small girl, wearing an old-fashioned red skirt. She stared directly at me. Then she smiled. I never told anyone what happened, not even my friends. Years later, after graduating, I returned to my hometown for a reunion. During the event, I learned something disturbing. A retired teacher approached me after hearing us discuss old ghost stories. When Hanako-san was mentioned, he became unusually quiet. Then he told us something he'd never shared before. In 1974, a student disappeared from that exact school, a young girl. She was never found. The last place anyone reported seeing her was the 3rd floor bathroom. The teacher laughed afterward and claimed it was just a coincidence. But before he walked away, he said something that still keeps me awake at night. "If you ever hear Hanako-san answer," he paused, "don't open the door." Then he looked directly at me, because if she speaks to you twice, she already knows your name. This happened in 2018, when I was a university student living in Sapporo, Japan. At the time, I was attending night classes while working part-time at a convenience store. My shift ended at midnight. Most nights, I'd take the same route home. The walk was about 20 minutes and took me through a quiet residential neighborhood. There wasn't much traffic, and after midnight, the streets were usually empty. One thing to understand about Japan is that seeing someone wear a surgical mask isn't unusual. People wear them for allergies, colds, or even just because they don't want to be recognized. That's why I didn't think much of it when I saw the woman. She was standing under a streetlight at the end of a long sidewalk. Even from a distance, something felt off. She wasn't walking. She wasn't looking at her phone. She was just standing there, motionless. The light above her flickered occasionally, making it difficult to see her clearly. As I got closer, I noticed she was wearing a long beige coat and a white surgical mask. Her black hair hung down almost to her waist. I remember checking my phone because I felt uncomfortable for some reason. When I looked back up, she was staring directly at me. I immediately looked away. In Japan, staring at strangers is considered rude. I kept walking. The sound of my footsteps echoed down the empty street. Then I heard another set of footsteps. Slow, deliberate, behind me. I glanced over my shoulder. The woman had started walking too. At first, I thought it was a coincidence. We were probably headed in the same direction. But after several minutes, I noticed something strange. No matter how fast I walked, She maintained the exact same distance behind me, not gaining, not falling behind, just following. I crossed the street. She crossed too. I turned onto a side road. She turned onto it as well. At this point, I was genuinely nervous. The neighborhood was completely deserted. No cars, no pedestrians, no open businesses, just empty streets and dim orange streetlights. I decided to stop suddenly and pretend to check my phone. The footsteps behind me stopped too. When I looked up, she was standing maybe 20 feet away, watching me. Then she spoke. "Am I beautiful?" Her voice was strangely calm, almost emotionless. I forced a laugh. Yes. The moment I answered, I remembered a story my grandmother used to tell me. A woman with a surgical mask. A woman who asked strangers if she was beautiful. Kuchisake Onna, the slit-mouthed woman. I felt my stomach tighten. The woman slowly raised her hands. Then she removed her mask. The lower half of her face had been cut from ear to ear. The wound stretched impossibly wide. I could see her teeth, her gums, the inside of her mouth. Blood stained the corners of her cheeks. "How about now?" she asked. Every instinct told me to run, but my legs wouldn't move. I remembered another detail from the story. If you answered yes, she killed you. If you answered no, she killed you. There was supposedly only one way to survive. You had to confuse her. I don't know why my brain remembered that at that moment. Maybe fear does strange things. The woman tilted her head. "Am I beautiful?" I swallowed. Then I said the first thing that came to mind. "You're average." For the first time, she seemed surprised. Her eyes narrowed, as if she was trying to understand my answer. Then she laughed. A horrible, wet sound. The kind of laugh someone would make if they had water in their lungs. I turned and ran. I expected to hear footsteps chasing me. Instead, everything was silent. I risked a glance behind me. The street was empty. The woman was gone. Completely gone. I kept running until I reached my apartment. Once inside, I locked the door and closed every curtain. I barely slept. The next morning, I convinced myself I had imagined the entire thing. Maybe it was a mentally ill person. Maybe the wound had been makeup. Maybe fear had distorted what I saw. A week passed. Then 2 weeks. Nothing happened. I started feeling embarrassed about how scared I'd been. Then one night around 2 a.m., I woke up to a noise outside my apartment. Tap, tap, tap. I sat up. The sound came from my bedroom window. Tap, tap, tap. I lived on the 3rd floor. There was no balcony, no fire escape, nothing. Yet someone was tapping on the glass. Slowly, I pulled the curtain aside. At first, I saw only darkness. Then I saw a face. The woman was outside my window, 3 stories above the ground, smiling. The slit in her mouth stretched wider than before. Her eyes never blinked. She pressed one finger against the glass. Tap, tap, tap. I screamed and stumbled backward. When I looked again, she was gone. The police searched the area the next day. They found nothing. No footprints, no evidence, no explanation. I graduated a year later and moved to Tokyo. I never saw her again. At least that's what I thought. Last month, I received a message request on social media. The account had no profile picture, no posts, no followers. There was only one image attached, a photograph of me walking home from work. The picture had been taken from behind. The timestamp showed it was taken 3 days earlier. At the bottom of the message was a single sentence. "Am I beautiful?" This happened in 2019 when I was 24 years old. At the time, I was living in Sendai and working for a small IT company. One Friday evening, after a particularly exhausting week, a coworker invited me to join a group trip to a rural hot spring resort hidden in the mountains. There were supposed to be 6 of us going. Unfortunately, everyone except me cancelled at the last minute. I had already booked my room and paid for transportation, so I decided to go anyway. The trip involved taking a local train into the countryside and then transferring to a bus that ran through the mountains. According to the schedule, the bus only ran 4 times a day. I caught the last one. The train ride was uneventful. By the time I arrived at the station, however, the sun was already setting. The station itself was tiny. 1 platform, 1 ticket machine. No staff, no other passengers. The bus stop sat directly outside. An old shelter stood beside the road. The paint was peeling. Several windows were cracked. A faded timetable hung from a rusted post. I checked my phone. No signal. That should have been my first warning. The bus arrived 10 minutes later. It was much older than I expected. The exterior was faded and scratched. The destination sign flickered. As the doors opened, I noticed something strange. The bus was empty. Not a single passenger, only the driver. I climbed aboard. The driver never greeted me, never looked at me. He simply stared forward. I paid my fare and sat near the middle. A few moments later, the doors closed. The bus pulled away. Darkness settled quickly as we entered the mountains. Streetlights became increasingly rare. Soon there were none at all. The headlights illuminated only a narrow strip of road ahead. Dense forest surrounded us on both sides. For almost 30 minutes, everything seemed normal. Then the bus stopped. There wasn't a bus stop. There wasn't a building. Nothing. Just forest. The doors opened. No one entered. After several seconds, the doors closed again. The bus continued moving. I assumed the driver had made a mistake. 10 minutes later, it happened again. The bus stopped. The doors opened. Nobody entered. Nobody exited. The doors closed. This time, I felt uneasy. I checked the timetable posted inside the bus. According to the schedule, there shouldn't have been any stops between the station and the hot spring village, yet we'd already stopped twice. The road continued climbing higher into the mountains. Eventually, we reached a tunnel. A long tunnel, longer than any I had ever seen. The entrance appeared suddenly from the darkness. Concrete walls stained black with age. A faded sign above it read, "Kurokami Tunnel." The bus entered. Immediately, my phone lost power. 100% battery, instantly dead. I stared at the screen in disbelief. Then I noticed something else. The temperature had dropped. The inside of the bus felt freezing. My breath became visible. The tunnel stretched endlessly ahead. The walls seemed unusually close. The headlights barely illuminated the darkness. Minutes passed, still inside the tunnel. I looked out the window. At first, all I saw was concrete. Then I noticed someone standing against the wall. A woman. She wore an old kimono. Her head hung forward, her face hidden by long hair. As the bus passed, she never moved. I sat upright. Maybe she worked nearby. Maybe there was another entrance. Then I saw another figure. A man, standing perfectly still. Then another, and another. Dozens of people lined the tunnel walls, all motionless, all staring toward the road, none reacting to the bus. A terrible feeling settled in my stomach. The tunnel should have ended by now. Instead, it continued. The figures became more numerous, hundreds of them, men, women, children, all standing silently in the darkness. The bus never slowed, never stopped. The driver showed no reaction whatsoever. I considered asking him what was happening. Then I noticed his reflection in the windshield. The driver's eyes were closed, completely closed, yet he continued driving. My heart nearly stopped. I stood up immediately. "Excuse me." No response. I moved closer. The driver's eyes remained shut. His hands gripped the wheel. His face was pale, almost grey. "Sir?" Still nothing. Then he smiled, without opening his eyes. A slow smile, the kind that appears when someone hears a joke. Every instinct told me to sit down, so I did. The tunnel continued. Then something changed. The passengers appeared. One moment the seats were empty. The next moment they weren't. I don't know how else to explain it. I blinked. Suddenly people occupied almost every seat. None of them had entered. They were simply there, sitting silently, facing forward. My pulse pounded in my ears. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Every passenger wore old clothing. Some looked decades out of date. Others looked even older. A few appeared wet, as though they had recently climbed from a river. One woman sat directly across from me. She wore a school uniform unlike any modern design. Her skin appeared unnaturally pale. Slowly, she turned her head toward me. The movement wasn't normal. It looked mechanical, jerky, wrong. Then she smiled. I looked away immediately. When I glanced back, every passenger was staring at me. Every single one. Hundreds of eyes, unblinking, watching. The bus suddenly stopped. The doors opened. This time, someone entered. A little girl. She couldn't have been older than 8. She stepped aboard, carrying a red umbrella. Water dripped from her clothes. Yet the umbrella was closed. The girl walked down the aisle, past every empty stair, past every silent passenger. Then she sat beside me. I wanted to move. I couldn't. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she whispered, "You're not supposed to be here." Her voice sounded perfectly normal, which somehow made it worse. I swallowed. "What do you mean?" The girl kept looking forward. "This bus doesn't carry living people." The doors closed. The bus began moving again. My entire body felt numb. "What are you talking about?" The girl finally turned toward me. Her eyes were filled with genuine fear. Not for herself, for me. "You got on the wrong bus." I wanted to ask more questions. Then the bus lights went out. Complete darkness. For several seconds, all I could hear was breathing. Hundreds of people breathing, all around me. Then came the whispering. Dozens of voices. Soft at first, growing louder. The passengers were speaking, not to each other, to me. Every voice repeated the same sentence, over and over. "Stay, stay, stay, stay!" I covered my ears. The whispers continued. Louder, closer. "Stay, stay, stay." The lights suddenly returned. Every passenger now stood in the aisle, facing me. The little girl grabbed my arm. "Run when the doors open!" The bus accelerated, faster, faster. The tunnel blurred past. The whispers became screams. The passengers began moving toward us. Slowly. Their faces stretched unnaturally, mouths widening, eyes blackening. The bus slammed on its brakes. The doors opened. The girl shoved me. "Now!" I jumped. I hit the pavement hard. The impact knocked the air from my lungs. When I looked up, the bus was already moving away. The passengers crowded every window, watching me, smiling. Within seconds, the vehicle disappeared into darkness. Silence returned. I found myself standing beside a road, outside the tunnel. The tunnel entrance behind me had collapsed years earlier, at least according to the sign posted nearby. A weathered notice stated that Kurakami Tunnel had been permanently sealed after a landslide in 1987, more than 30 years earlier. There was no road through it anymore. No buses. No traffic. Nothing. I stumbled toward the nearest village and eventually found help. The police listened to my story. They assumed I had become lost, perhaps suffered dehydration. Nobody believed me until I described the little girl. An elderly officer became noticeably uncomfortable. After the interview, he pulled me aside. He told me that in 1985, a bus carrying school children had disappeared while passing through Kurakami Tunnel during a storm. The vehicle was never recovered. Neither were the passengers. Officially, the case remains unsolved. Before leaving, the officer asked me one question. What color was the umbrella? I told him it was red. The officer stared at the floor, then nodded slowly. According to local rumors, one victim from the missing bus was always seen carrying a red umbrella. For years afterward, travelers claimed they occasionally encountered a bus near the tunnel late at night, a bus that wasn't listed on any schedule, a bus whose passengers never seemed to blink, a bus that only appeared to people traveling alone. I never returned to that area, but 6 months ago, something happened. I received a package with no return address. Inside was a photograph. The image showed the interior of an old bus. Every seat was occupied. Every passenger stared directly at the camera. And sitting near the middle, beside a girl holding a red umbrella, was me.